In this video we have the OnePlus 13 and it's gonna go to the same test as the previous phones have. Let's see how it stacks up to the other phones in the PhoneUX protocol. To get started, the first thing I notice when I pick up the phone is that everything feels super smooth. There's nothing sharp, or even like there's no sharp angle or anything on this phone, so it's very comfortable when you're holding it. Now on the pinky shelf test, the pressure, you do feel some pressure because the phone is weighty. You know, it's a 6.8 inch screen. It's not gonna be a light phone, but at least there's nothing sharp down here that is gonna, you know, make the experience worse or annoying or uncomfortable. The other thing that you will probably notice is that the back glass is a different material or texture, and it's kind of like an in-between in terms of how slick it is. So glossy back glasses are actually a little bit less slick than matte, and then this is kind of in the in-between. So it's a nice middle ground to reduce or not show any fingerprints, but also to provide some sort of friction on your hands, but it still is fairly slippery. And then the last piece is that this phone has a mode selector for the sound, and this one has that neural design on it, so it provides texture. So just with a little bit of pressure downward, you can slide it up and down to where you need it. So it's very good at catching your finger to get that grip. And for the ergonomics, I give the OnePlus 13 an 8 out of 10. Next, we're going to be talking about the camera speed, how fast it boots up and takes a picture. That way, like in those rush scenarios where you're taking it out of your pocket, you know, you could get the shot. And the OnePlus surprised me in actually being, if not the quickest, maybe the second quickest next to iPhone, how fast it was. Yeah, so the power button, double press power to turn on the camera, quick access, was not turned on by default. And by default, it's actually the volume down when the screen is off. And that works really fast. I mean, as you can tell, it was already up and running. And plus, if you use that button, you don't have to adjust your finger at all to take the follow-up picture. I will say there is no delay. It's very fast. I guess the only delay is gonna be kind of like iPhone, where it's an instant picture, but you have to wait like maybe a half to 3/4 of a second for the follow-up because it has to process. You also have the ability to have it here, which opens it up right away. What I like is that there's not really a delay when the camera is starting up. It's just basically instantly shows it to you, and then it's ready for a photo right away. So it's very quick. The other thing that I like to point out is that the modes are customizable. So it kind of just like Samsung, you click on edit here, and did I press the wrong one? There you go. You click on edit here and you can actually move around from the main extra modes section. You could drag them down, and besides the photo and video, which I think that's most cameras, if not all of them, you could move the other ones around to where you think will work best. So there is plenty of customization, so you could move around quickly within the camera app. So in terms of the camera speed, this phone definitely gets a 9 out of 10. The next category is going to be the haptics, and this is the phone that I kind of compare all the rest to. In my opinion, this has some of the best haptics you can get. So for starters, just like Samsung and Google, you can adjust the haptics. You actually, it's closer to Samsung, where you can adjust it higher or lower than when it comes out of the box. The other thing that this phone has that the other ones don't is the feel of the haptic. So there's actually two different types of feel, and this kind of goes to like which style you like better. So you have crisp, which is a more intense, quick vibration, versus gentle, that's kind of like a little nudge. Also, the haptics that they have here, it really does make a difference. You get very good feel for the haptics. My favorite one is always the volume, which is why I've been testing all the other volume ones. So with this phone, when you hold the volume, as you go up in volume, the haptic gets tougher and tougher, more intense and more intense, until you get to the top where you get the thump from hitting the max. And it's the opposite going down. It gets softer and softer until you get the same thump when you get to the bottom half, to the bottom bar. But the reason I can't give this a perfect score though is because it doesn't have it in every situation. Actually, there are some situations in which this phone doesn't have it that other phones do. So it's still not perfect, but it's, to me, the best one in the market right now. So that's why for the haptics, I'm giving this an easy 9 out of 10. The next thing that I want to cover is the immersion, and this has part of it is really good and part of it could use some improvement. So starting with the sound, like we always start with, it's actually a bit of a mixed bag. So overall the sound is pretty good, but I feel like it's missing a little bit on either the highs or the mids. So on top of that, the top speaker, which I've noticed normally it's pretty tough for it to keep up with the bottom speaker, this one falls behind as much as the Pixel. You're gonna hear more sound coming out of the bottom speaker than the top speaker, and that's expected, obviously, especially with the bass. But with the best phones for sound, that top speaker is keeping up pretty good in the highs and mids with the bottom speaker. But then we get into the screen, and this is actually one of my favorite parts of this phone because it's a very smooth experience. The slight curve gives it a smaller look to the bezels on the edge, so it's very thin bezels, it's symmetrical, and the punch hole is high and it's a small punch hole, which is all leads to having a great viewing experience. Plus, you also get a very bright screen. This is in contention to be one of the brightest screens that's available in the US market. And it's not just that, it's just plain bright. You also get good colors on it as well. It's a very enjoyable screen. Plus, you get the ultra smooth 120 Hertz, along with the higher than 1080p screen resolution. And when you're walking outside, it's going to be very easy to see in direct sunlight. And I've had a good experience with how long it lasts. It actually gives you a good amount of time before it starts to dim for overheating. So for the overall immersion, I'm giving the OnePlus 13 a 7 out of 10, which is a solid score. And the last thing that I'm going to be covering is the multitasking. And obviously, because it's a slab phone, it has some of the limitations as the slab phone tends to have, but it's probably the best one. So let's take a look at it. So I'll click on this, split screen, and then I can choose here what I want, which I think is a better way of choosing the app you want. So now you got the 50-50 split. Now you can add a floating window. So come here, floating window, and now you have the calculator as floating window. The difference is, when you minimize it, you get it on a tab there. So it's completely out of the way and not just a floating bubble that's all up in the way. So now that we have the 50-50 split, you can do the same thing where you expand it to the 90-10. But either way, you tap here and you bring up the calculator again. So you can use that calc, move it around, minimize it again. So because of this, it is technically the most convenient one to use. It gives you the most versatility. And this leads me to give it the highest score you can really give a slab phone, because even the worst large foldable is going to be better. And that's going to be a 6 out of 10 for the multitasking. So with all of that added up, the OnePlus 13 ends up with a 39 out of 50 total score. And that puts it up there with the best of the phones, honestly. It's just small things that can be improved that you probably wouldn't even be aware of if you were to not compare it to anyone else, any other company. But it definitely hits harder than it's priced. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and found it helpful. If you have a different score for any of the categories, please let me know in the comments. That would be fun to discuss and to see other people's opinions. And if you're interested in keeping on watching this series, I will be reviewing the Nothing phone next. So stick around and subscribe for that video. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one.